What up, brawlers? Welcome back to Throwing Hands. I have failed in fantasy once again. Daniel, how'd you fare?
I've got a big win this week. I've had just terrible luck in fantasy in terms of injuries, in terms of guys staying on the field. But we've finally got things figured out. Got a big week out of Mike Davis, who was a huge waiver wire pickup in place of Christian McCaffrey there in Carolina. Got a big week out of him. I got a big week out of who else did I get a big week out of? James Conner as well. A big win over Houston for the Steelers, for my Steelers, and get a big week out of James Conner in addition to that. So a good win in fantasy this week. Happy to be at 1-2, and we're moving on up from there.
Yep, I'm hoping to find some better luck, but it's not looking too bright for I can't say my team name. But anyway, to the first bout of the main card, Hakeem Duwadu versus Zbair Tukhugov. Duwadu was not the favorite in this fight, but he put on a clinic against Tukhugov. I mean, he's picking his strikes. 69 of his 70 total strikes were significant strikes. So he was aiming and firing, so to speak. So what were your thoughts on this one?
Duwadu was just, chasing Tukugov for so much of this fight. He stopped at one point, and this kind of went viral on Twitter at one point. He just stopped and screamed, "Stop effing running and fight me!" And I think that's kind of what we saw throughout this fight. Is it was Duwadu pushing the pace, keeping Tukugov moving backwards, and I think that's reflected in the strikes because again, 69 of 70 landed strikes were significant for Hakeem Dawodu. I think he was really impressed in this fight. And I think Kukagov, if I'm correct, came in 4 pounds overweight, and Dawodu still was so dominant, was still able to control the pace of this fight, control where this fight went. I was impressed by that effort, combined with the fact that his opponent came in so far overweight, and the fact that he was the underdog coming into this. I was pleasantly surprised by what Hakeem Dawodu was able to do in the octagon.
Definitely. Let's go on to what's next for these people. For Tukugov, it's kind of hard to tell. I think we could see him get somebody, about the same level as Dawadu was before this fight. But I don't know. It's interesting to see. Tukugov hasn't really fought too much in the past year. So we'll see what Uncle Dana wants to do with him. What do you think?
I can't disagree with anything you said there. Again, Tukagov has not fought particularly often, but he's a guy with talent. He's a guy that can add something to this featherweight division. So he's going to get another fight. I'm just not sure against who it would be.
Yeah, and for Dawadu, 5 wins in a row. I'm very intrigued to see how this guy moves forward. I think we see him get somebody in the top 15, maybe an Edson Barboza if they really want to test him a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, somebody towards the back end of that top 15. I would say anywhere between 12 and 15. That would be Ryan Hall, Shane Burgos, Edson Barboza, and Bryce Mitchell. I think any of those guys would be a competitive fight for Hakeem Dawodu and give him the opportunity to prove himself as a legitimate contender.
All right. To the next matchup of the night, a women's bantamweight bout, if I'm not mistaken, Ketlin Vieira versus Sajara Eubanks. Vieira, man, I think she showed out. She came up, got 2 takedowns against a solid wrestler in Sarge, and I think Sarge. It was interesting watching Sarge because when she was on the feet, she was getting it done. Because most of Vieira's strikes came when she was on top control. It was an interesting fight to watch, and maybe there's a new contender emerging in Vera. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Ketlin Vieira looked very good on Saturday. Again, Sajara Eubanks is an older fighter. She's not fought particularly often, but she's very well regarded within the UFC. A very tough fighter, very strong fighter, and just very competitive. And Ketlin Vieira was able to go out there and match that competitiveness, do it for 3 rounds, and just go battle. She was actually outlanded by one in terms of significant strikes, but in total strikes landed, outclassed her there by 20. So Vieira was able to control the fight against somebody in Eubanks that it's very hard to gain control over. And again, she landed 2 takedowns. Eubanks didn't land any, and that's really impressive against somebody who is such an elite level wrestler, an elite level Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. The fact that Ketlin Vieira was able to control her on the ground and also outland her by 20, I think that's a very big statement from Ketlin Vieira that she's not somebody to be messed with.
Definitely. I'm not gonna add anything to that. I think Sarge Eubanks becomes a little bit of a gatekeeper in this bantamweight division. There's
Yeah,
not too many people in this bantamweight division to begin with, but it's I don't know. She's not done by any means, but she's definitely not gonna see the top 10 anytime soon. What are your thoughts?
I think it speaks more to the lack of depth in that bantamweight division than anything else. I think Sajara Eubanks has a place in the UFC, but uh, your your number 13 contender has a 6-5 professional record. Again, the women's bantamweight division has never been particularly deep, but that says a lot about what the product that the UFC is putting together in that women's bantamweight division is right now.
So for Vieira, I think we could see her fight the loser of this whole Aldana fight. I think that's probably what's next for her. I don't really see it going any other way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. That puts her against either way somebody that's been a legitimate contender in the past, somebody that's still a legitimate contender today, and gives her the opportunity potentially vault herself up into that top five with a win.
Definitely. Alrighty. To the next match of the night. Kai Kara France versus Brandon Royval. This Royval kid, man, he is going to be something. He's only 2 fights into his UFC career, and he's already next in line, I think, for the title shot after Garbrandt and Figueiredo go at it in November. So I'm genuinely interested to see where Royval's career takes off. And for Kai Kara France, I mean, he put on a decent show, but Royval's submission game just too strong. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Brandon Royval was ridiculously impressive on Saturday. Again, a pretty competitive first round. Kai Kara France was still outstruck 51-22 and 39-22 on significant. But Brendan Royval, it was competitive through the first, and then he just shut things down in the second. Kai Kara France goes in for a takedown. Royval wraps him up, guillotine choke, drops him to the floor. It was over. It was academic from Brandon Royval. A very impressive clinical performance. He's one of the most unassuming looking guys in the UFC. He just looks like a guy you'd see on the sidewalk, but he's so talented in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's so talented at setting up his grappling, and he can strike well enough to stay in the fight and to set up what he wants to do on the ground. So I agree with you. Brandon Royval is going to rocket to the top of those flyweight rankings. I'm not sure I would put him next in line for a title shot, but he's definitely got to be up there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but let's talk about what's next for these guys. I don't know what's next for Kai Kara France. This flyweight division in men is so shallow. I mean, we could see him probably fight Dvorak or Tim Elliott next, but I don't know. I could see him moving up a little bit. I mean, he is short. I will give him that, but I think maybe a move up would be beneficial to him because he'll have more power behind his kicks and punches, especially for kickboxer if he gains a little weight. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a possibility. We could see him go to 135. Like you said, he's just 5'4", so that would be difficult for him in terms of reach. There's plenty of guys in this division for him to fight. You know, Alexander Pantoja's there, Jussier Formiga. I'm not sure you want to see him take a step up in competition still as a relatively young guy coming off of a loss. But there's guys for him there to fight. I think Kai Kara France is somebody that is still going to be relevant in the flyweight division moving forward. And I think there's plenty of guys he can fight to try to get back on track.
Definitely. And for Roy Val, ooh, it's interesting. I think he'll get somebody top 5 next for sure. And I think if he wins that next fight, he didn't take too much damage in this fight, so we might see him again by the end of the year. But if he wins that fight, I think he's next up for the title shot. What do you think?
I think so. I think he's probably one fight away from being considered a title contender against Davison Figueiredo or Cody Garbrandt, depending on which way that fight goes in November. An interesting fight that I think I would like to see is matching him up against Askar Askarov, who had that win over Alexander Pantoja by decision back at Fight Night 172. And I think that would be a very entertaining fight because Askarov is another guy that has risen so quickly in this flyweight division. He's 12-0, has only fought 3 times in the UFC, and he's already the number 3 125er in the world. And they're both guys that do it on the ground. Royval is definitely Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu focused. That's the way he fights. That's the way he wants to finish people. And then Askarov comes from that Dagestani wrestling background. He's got 7 submission wins. I think you take two of the best ground fighters in the flyweight division and really in any of the lower weight classes in the UFC, match them up against one another. Winner gets a title shot. I think that from an MMA purist perspective, from somebody who watches MMA for the technical brilliance of the sport, I think Askarov versus Royval would be a very entertaining fight, and I think that could probably main event a fight night card as well.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there. I think if you like ground game, I think the Askarov Roy Val thing is the fight to make. Like I found that Charles Rosa Bryce Mitchell fight back in May very entertaining to watch. Just two guys who like to grapple going at it, and those are some of the most entertaining fights if you really just like to sit down and concentrate on what these guys are doing. So, hey, I think that's a fight to make, Daniel. Alrighty, to the co-main event of the evening, Reyes versus Blachowicz. Dude, Jan Blachowicz, man, this dude hits hard. I mean, I knew he hit hard before this fight even started, but what he did to Dominic Reyes' uh, left, right lat, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, biology's not my thing. I'm a journalism major, but what he did to his body with 2 kicks, making that welt, I think when I saw that happen, I'm like, he's winning this fight. And then, boom, nice left hook to the cheekbone, and Reyes was toast. What were your thoughts on this one?
That was absolute destruction in that fight. I was sitting there and I was watching this fight, and the thought that came into my mind was that this was reminding me of Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson, and within seconds of that, that was over because Jan Blachowicz had put Dominic Reyes lights out, and obviously that Tony Ferguson Justin Gaethje fight went to decision. But Jan Blachowicz at 37 years old is an absolute monster. He's a monster, and that's not something you often say about guys that do have these late career renaissances. Guys that you talk about figuring things out late in their careers, you're talking about, hey, this guy was, a gatekeeper for prospects for 6 or 7 years, and whoa, now he's in the top 15. He's won 3 or 4 fights in a row. You're not saying that about guys that lost 4 out of 5 fights in the UFC, and 2 years later, they're the light heavyweight champion of the world. There's a flip or a switch, I should say, somewhere that has flipped for Jan Blachowicz in the last 2 years, and it's turned him into one of the most dominant fighters on the planet. And he took a guy that has challenged John Jones as well as almost anybody in the world has, and made him look weak, made him look vulnerable, and put him down in just a brutal way. So Jan Blachowicz, man, he's not a paper champion by any means. He's not a guy that has just, tripped and fallen into the light heavyweight championship because John Jones vacated it. This is a guy that's a legitimate champion, a legitimately one of the best fighters in the world, and legitimately a guy that I think can have multiple successful title defenses.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think I he's 37. That's scary. That's a crazy thing. He's developed this weird old man strength that that's just carried him honestly. And like you said, he lost 4 of his first 5 UFC bouts. Now he's the champ. Like that doesn't happen. So I'm very curious to see how Jan Blachowicz handles this championship reign. But on to what's next for these guys. For Dominic Reyes, I don't know what's next for him. I don't think he's gonna get the loser of this Santos Sheriff fight. I want to see him fight Yuri Prochazka. That's the fight I want to see personally. I think will he get it? Maybe not, or Rakic. But hey, I think that's the fight we all want to see: Prochazka versus Reyes. What do you want?
I think I want to see that fight. I think that would be a very exciting fight. I think that's a fight that makes sense. Again, Prochazka is on such an upward trajectory. I'm not sure you want to feed Dominic Reyes into that situation coming off of a loss, but that's certainly the fight I would love to see.
Alrighty. And for Blachowicz, I think it's pretty simple what's next for him. The winner of Santos versus Cher gets the next title shot. What do you think?
Yeah, Dana White has been pretty clear about this. Thiago Santos and Glover Teixeira on November 7th is going to be the winner of that is going to get a shot at 205. Though Dana White did clarify if John Jones, for whatever reason, were to move back down to 205, that would be the next fight. It would be him against Jan Blachowicz. I don't see John Jones immediately coming back down to 205. I think he's going to test himself at heavyweight, see what he can do there first. So it's going to be Santos or Teixeira taking on Jan Blachowicz next. I think that's a pretty clear kind of line of succession when it comes to the light heavyweight title contendership.
For sure. This light heavyweight division's deep. I
Yeah,
I'm I'm very excited to see how this heavyweight division goes. I mean, Anthony Smith's 8, and he was fighting for a title a year and a half ago. I mean, it also shows his decline, but still, this
yeah,
this this
still.
this division's deep, and it's really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how this pans out over the next year. Alrighty, to the main event of the evening. We both chose Paulo Costa to win this fight by knockout within like the first round, but Costa was very timid for some reason. He didn't put on the pressure like he usually does, and Adesanya just put on a clinic. I
Yeah,
mean, 55 of his 84 strikes were significant. All of his strikes were significant that he landed. You couldn't ask much more from Israel Adesanya in this fight, especially from a guy like Costa, who's just kind of standing back there and waiting. What were your thoughts?
yeah. I said on the preview for this card that this fight was going to be decided in the first 2 minutes. And within 2 minutes, if you looked at Paulo Costa's left calf, you knew where this fight was going because Israel Adesanya was just chopping down that lead leg, chopping down that leg that Paulo Costa was going to have to drive off of to get any kind of power into his punches. And Adesanya took that away within the first 2 minutes. And from that point on, it was elementary. It was academic. Adesanya he's so precise, he's so creative, and he packs so much more power than people realize. And he went right after Paulo Costa. He kept him backing up. He controlled the octagon, and even when Costa tried to come forward, Adesanya was able to shut him off with the reach advantage. Adesanya's special, man. He's on another level as a striker. He's a step up from anybody that you can see in the world right now when it comes to just pure striking. He's he's special. I don't know how else to put it. He's a special fighter. I don't know why I underestimated him coming into this fight. Maybe it's because, subconsciously you always want to see the guy that it seems like it's effortless for. You always want to see him knocked off the pedestal. But man, Israel Adesanya, this weekend just reaffirmed in my mind how talented, how dominant, and how unique Israel Adesanya is in the UFC.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think we're gonna talk about Adesanya a little more in a hot second, but for what's next for Costa, I don't know. It's tough to tell. I think we could probably see him fight the loser of Whitaker versus Cannonier. I think that's the fight I'd like to see, but I don't know. He didn't show too much in that fight, and I don't know what Dana White really was. I don't think he was too pleased with what Costa
Yeah.
showed. But what were your thoughts?
I think you're looking at either the loser of Cannonier, Whitaker, or maybe even Jack Hermanson. Jack Hermanson's a guy that's on the way up right now. I think a fight with Costa would be beneficial to both of them. A win for either one of those guys would be beneficial. I think it's a fight that Costa could win to get back on track. And if Jack Hermanson were to win that fight, I think that would be a star-making performance for him. So again, you would be putting Costa in a position to lose two in a row because of the way that Jack Hermanson's been fighting lately. But I think that'd be a very interesting fight to watch. Or the loser of Whitaker Cannonier, because again, that just sets up a very clear title progression.
Definitely. Okay. Who in this division gives Adesanya the biggest challenge?
So that's a very good question. It might be Jack Hermanson just because of what he can do as a wrestler. And even then, Adesanya is going to outclass him on the feet at every turn. But beyond that, I mean, Robert Whitaker does what Robert Whitaker does, but we've seen Israel Adesanya dominate him before. We saw him, beat the crap out of Holocaust on Saturday. Jared Cannonier can stick you with one punch and put you in the freaking graveyard. But again, Adesanya, in terms of striking, is so much more refined. I think you get down to number 4, and it might be Jack Hermanson because of what he can do on the ground. And I think he's powerful enough, he's strong enough, he's built in a way that he would be able to get Israel Adesanya to the ground and probably keep him there. It's just a matter.
That's if Hermanson can get to him.
Right, exactly. That's a matter of Jack Hermanson getting into the pocket, putting himself in a position for a takedown. Of anybody in this division, I think he would have the best chance. But man, it's
Yeah.
watching Israel Adesanya is like, watching somebody play UFC 4 on rookie. Like it's the combinations and the dominance. It's just it's special, and it's not something we've seen very often ever in mixed martial arts ever.
Yeah, I mean, I wish Kelvin Gastelum was better after that fight because
Yeah.
I think that fight really just changed the trajectory of his career, sadly. I mean, I want to see Gastelum succeed again. I
Yeah.
mean, he's fun to watch. But for me, I might be crazy sounding like this, but I think Darren Till would probably give Israel Adesanya a problem.
Yeah, they're very similar guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and I think Darren Till has a lucha libre background,
Yeah.
so I think he would give Adesanya a challenge on the ground if he decided to take it there. And with his Muay Thai background, I could see Darren Till actually giving him a fairly decent challenge, but he's got to string together a couple wins first, and I don't know whom he'll fight next, but it's interesting to see. And Adesanya also talked about wanting to fight John Jones. I don't see that happening, honestly, very
Yeah.
soon, because think about it. If Adesanya wants to go up to heavyweight, how much is he going to weigh? 215? And by the time that happens, John Jones is going to be 250, and he's
Yeah.
just going to ragdoll Adesanya. What are your thoughts on
Would
this
have
potential
to
matchup?
that fight would have to happen at 205. And John Jones, from all accounts, despite what he said about Jan Blachowicz on Saturday, I don't think John Jones wants to go back to light heavyweight anytime soon. He hasn't even fought at heavyweight yet. So I I want that fight to happen. I want to say that fight will happen, but I can't say that for sure. It's gonna have to happen at light heavyweight. It's gonna have to happen at 205 because I don't think Israel Adesanya would be able to handle what kind of athlete John Jones is at a heavyweight weight class.
Absolutely not. Alrighty, to some news. We got some good stuff, I think. Let me think real quick. The 254 card was announced.
Yes.
That was exciting. What are your thoughts on that fight card?
I mean, it's obviously headlined by Khabib and Justin Gaethje. I think that's going to be an outstanding fight. But then, I mean, you look up and down the card, and Robert Whitaker, Jared Cannonier, again, that's probably going to decide who gets the next shot at Israel Adesanya. If Jared Cannonier wins, I should say. I think if Jared Cannonier wins, Dana White has said he will be the next contender. I think that's a fight that Jared Cannonier has been waiting on, and I think it's one that if he wins against Robert Whitaker, I think he's earned. You look up and down this card, Alexander Volkov versus Walt Harris, two veteran heavyweights. That's always going to be exciting, even if those aren't particularly guys that are in title contention. Islam Makhachev, a guy on the way up against Rafael Dos Anjos, former light heavyweight champion, going back to 155. Cynthia Calvillo versus Lauren Murphy, I think, is going to be a very exciting fight. I think it's going to be a fight that kind of helps decide that division, who's really going to be the next true contender coming out of there. And then Magomed Ankalaev versus Ian Kudalaba. Finally, we get the rematch. It's going to happen at 254.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. We're gonna will it into existence.
The people's main event.
The people. Yeah, sure. Okay. McGregor and Poirier might be doing a charity fight.
I saw that.
I'm interested to see if the UFC even allows that.
Connor's retired, but like, I don't see the UFC allowing a contracted fighter in Dustin Poirier, uh, to just I know it would be for charity, but to just step out, fight for another promotion out of the blue, particularly a fight being promoted by a former UFC fighter, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Cormier said something interesting yesterday about John Jones. He thinks he'll return to 205, and he just went up to avoid Reyes. I think that's complete crap because I think John Jones would have destroyed Reyes the second time. What are your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, that's DC being DC, and going back into his history with John Jones, I'm not surprised. But yeah, John Jones isn't coming up to heavyweight to just try to dodge Dominic Reyes. That's idiotic. That just doesn't make sense. I think John Jones sees an opportunity in the heavyweight division, sees that Stipe Miocic doesn't have a true challenger after Francis Ngannou, and I think he's coming up to this heavyweight division because he thinks he can legitimately compete. He thinks he can be the heavyweight champion of the world, and I think he can as well.
I think you can too. Do you have anything else?
Not much to add. You've covered it pretty much there. Back to that Adesanya fight. Just a brief note that I wanted to point out, and something that I thought was kind of funny, but was also a really cool tactical thing. Adesanya in the lead up to this fight had his hair dyed like bright pink. And I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah, I saw
His
that.
father told him before the fight that he should change back to his natural hair color because if he caught Costa to the point to where he couldn't see clearly, he would still be able to pick out the pink hair and know where to throw punches. Which, again, it seems like something so stupid, but that's awesome. That tactical thought coming from, I mean, just Adesanya's dad. Like that's really cool. That's something that I found really interesting after that fight that he said.
That is pretty interesting. That is interesting. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know, that middleweight division's locked up for a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming back on, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll be back to preview Holm versus Aldana that fight night. Solid card. I was
Yeah.
surprised, but hey, all right, guys, we'll see you next time.